we were recording, so it's a good thing it probably didn't record.
Wait, what? What did you say?
Well, what if he puts this recording in there?
I can't post first period because it crapped out on me.
Oh,
so yeah.
So
So
you'll never know.
we'll never know. All right, so we'll go over what it is, but quiz grade 30 points. Okay, so this one's going to go in this quiz grade. You're not being graded based on your accuracy of taking someone else's multiple choice quiz. Essentially, you are making an AP multiple choice test passage questions. You're not doing a full-blown exam. You are coming up with, in total, 12 questions that's going to be based on something that we have read from the course reading. So you're not doing 4 or 5 passages, 50, 60 questions. One passage, 12 questions about that one passage. It's up to you as to how you want to go so far as groups and things like that. You can go individual or you can work with partners as long as you are in the 1 to 3 range. So a super group of the whole class is not going to happen, nor will there be 2 groups going on. But you can go, single, which some people just want to do from the get-go, and you can do pairs, and you can go up to 3 people. I'm not going to assign groups. I'm not going to pull names from the head or anything like that. I'll let you guys figure out what it is you want to do. You do have to choose something that we have read this year, all right? And so that could go all the way back to summer reading with anything from the Grapes of Wrath to Invisible Man and anything in between. The one exception that I put to it is you can't do any poems. I don't want Grant going, I can think of some really good multiple choice questions for this poem as he looks back at old quizzes. Now, it's not to say you don't want to look at your old quizzes or you don't want to look at old AP multiple choice stuff like you have a midterm, because those are good resources to see how questions are created and the wording and structure of them. But I want you to choose something that we have read. In the past, people have asked, can I take something that we did as like a rhetorical analysis and do multiple choice questions about that? And I said, sure. So like, for example, I think it was a group last year, the Magnasols, the shoe inserts with the, reflexology and all that kind of stuff, they made multiple choice questions about that AP passage. I was okay with that. But don't take, passage that we did multiple choice questions about and use that one. If you are taking something from a book, you're obviously not going to use the whole book. So you're not going to have the Grapes of Wrath, here's my 621-page passage, and my 12 questions about, those 600 pages. You would be taking chunks or parts, excerpts from it, and making questions about it. So it could certainly be books that we've read. It could be nonfiction article, like when we were doing the synthesis, Letter from Birmingham Jail, Henry David Thoreau. Many of you have a soft spot in your heart for Mary Wollstonecraft, so you can go back to her and do some things. A Modest Proposal tends to be a popular thing, or anything that we've read from the Bedford Reader. Personally, I think nonfiction is easier, but that's just me personally saying that. If you want to do Catcher in the Rye, Cuckoo's Nest, something along those lines, you certainly can. But one thing to keep in mind is when you choose the passage, all of your questions are going to be based from that passage. So all the reader knows is what the reader sees. So if you are taking something that Chief doing a flashback from electric shock therapy, you wouldn't be asking a question that involves the reader knowing about a boat trip or something like that happened earlier in the novel. Someone asked the question, can I have a paragraph that introduces the concept that's kind of going on? And with that, I was fine. So if you're doing something with the Catcher in the Rye, person wanted to introduce the fact that Holden Caulfield's younger brother died 3 years before, you could include that if you thought it was important, for the passage. For your passage, if you need to eliminate a couple paragraphs, use ellipses to go from one paragraph to the next, you can certainly do that as well to get it to kind of fit within our space. Yes. So if you want to do, so like the jungle, awakening, whatever the case may be, and if you want to do color and water, I'm okay with you doing that one too. I think for everything, I do have PDF copies. Most of them are in Google Classroom. The independent reading novels wouldn't be, but I think I have a PDF for everything that we read, which makes it a little bit easier for setting up the document, itself. So you don't have to kind of retype the whole thing. There would be some formatting issues that have to be taken care of, which we'll get into, but shouldn't be hard to at least kind of select that passage. I would suggest, like especially with saying independent reading, and Jesse wants to work with you, again, making that up. I would work, if you are going to work with someone, I would work with someone who read the same book. It'd be, if you're going to do 1984, you're going to do Awakening, or you're going to do Jungle, I think it would make sense if that's something that you read, so that you can, be useful to them. Whatever. Any questions about at least that part, where you're pulling stuff from? So if you want to do Prologue from Invisible Man, go for it. If you want to go all the way back to something earlier in the year, that's perfectly fine too. What you're going to do then is come up with 9 different types of questions. So we got vocab and context, narration, point of view, going all the way down to effect. So everyone's going to have these 9 types. This is not the order that they're going to appear in, but these are the types of questions. So, Grant, how many vocabulary and context questions do you think you have to make? Good. So for numbers 1 through 6, so down to syntax and all the way up, those are going to be 1 question each, hence the number here that we have in parentheses, all right? So you're going to do 1 question for each of those types. When you get down to 7, 8, and 9, you're going to do 2 rhetorical purpose, 2 literary technique, 2 effect questions. So 6 questions at the top, 1 through 6, and then 6 more questions using these 7, 8, 9. So that's where you get 12 questions from. From your knowledge of taking AP multiple choice, what order do the questions usually go in? Chronological, based on like the line numbers or the paragraphs of the passage. So please don't be the person who goes, I don't know, Mr. Kane, I just don't see a tone question going as my 4th question. Like, okay, that's fine, put it someplace else. But the order is going to be based on the line numbers that you are using. So if your vocabulary and context question is going to deal with something in like line 53, and your pronoun reference is going to be something in line 34, question 3 is going to come before question number 1. Obviously, you're not going to number it that way, 3 and then 1, but that order will kind of vary a little bit. One of the best things to have out while you're working on your questions is having past AP exams, because you can kind of see how some of those questions are set up. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory. So vocabulary and context, you're literally looking at identifying the meaning of the words in a passage. It could be like a language enrichment kind of fancy word, or there might be something that is like an example of like dialect, vernacular, slang term. Like Holden Caulfield could be using a slang term. That could be the word that you kind of use context of meaning and trying to figure out. Or there could be a word that's a pretty typical word, but maybe it's just getting used out of a normal context, and then you could use that as your vocabulary and context. But basically, you're looking at the meaning of the words. Narration point of view is one that sometimes folks will kind of get a little confused with the tone question. Tone, you're going to be taking a look at the overall tone of the passage. So we talk about some tones being sarcastic or being aggressive, critical, things of that nature. Narration point of view, it's not that you're doing, is this first person, second person, third person, but you're taking a look at an attitude or a viewpoint towards a particular subject. So if you were doing Swift with a modest proposal, you could do something like the author's perspective towards beggars is most likely, and then you come up with a description as to how he feels towards it. So it's not so much the tone of the word choice, the passage, but it's a viewpoint, it's an attitude that the author has, the writer has, towards some kind of particular subject. It could be something like the author's viewpoints towards the English landowners could best be described as, and that would certainly work as a narration point of view kind of question. And I'm going to be walking around helping you out with it, so if you have questions as they come, they certainly let me know. Pronoun reference, this is that pronoun antecedent thing, so it in line 14 refers back to, and you give a whole bunch of answer choices, line numbers as to pronoun reference, tone, diction, and then syntax. I think we're going to be okay with characterization of how sentence structures are done. You can do things for specific lines, you can do things for specific paragraphs, you can also do things for the whole entire passage. Like sometimes you'll have questions where the tone of the passage as a whole could best be characterized as, and you can do something like that. Those usually go at either the very beginning or the end. How many answer choices do your questions have? 5. So you're going to go A through E for each. What never shows up as an option for E? None of the above or all of the above. So don't use that. However, some of the above. You do kind of get an all of the above sort of question every now and then, but it's not set up that way. Can you think of a way in which you can get the
When it's the 1, 2, and 3.
the Roman numeral questions? So there could be some things where, and I mean, this honestly happens, where you're trying to make the answers, and you can only come up with like 3 options, and after that you're like, boy, I'm really hitting the wrong bottom. I can't think of like an answer that's going to sound good, because you don't want to have like the sky, Heath, as like answer choices. Megan's junior prom date. So what we want to have, it's invisible man. Haven't seen it. Doesn't exist. But it does. If you can only come up with 3 options, you could have Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3, and then 1 only, 1 and 2, 1, 2 and 3, 2 and 3, and all that kind of stuff. So you can do Roman numeral questions if you want. It's not required. If you decide to do that, you can have up to 3 Roman numeral questions. So I don't mean like only 3 Roman numerals, but up to 3 Roman numeral questions. So if you want to use them, you can. Some of you really detest them. So maybe you want to use them so you can look pain upon other people.
What even is that?
I don't know if we had any. I don't think we've had any with the poetry quizzes lately. I can't think off the top of my head the last time we had it. Sometimes there would be like it could say the 5th paragraph uses, and then it'll say like Roman numeral 1. There's an example in your packet that we can look at. It'll say like Roman numeral 1 simile, Roman numeral 2 metaphor, Roman numeral 3 personification. And so then the answer choices will just say 1 only, 2 only, 1 and 2, 1, 2 and 3. So it's a way that it does kind of give you some flexibility if you want. We haven't had too many in a while though. I do think your next quiz for poetry does have one though coming up if I remember correctly, which Emma's now making a face. Okay. See, so you would definitely want to do these on other people. No? All right, you're a noble person. Another thing to think about so far as types of questions, there's also those questions that have the word except in them. You can do some of those as well. So you could do something where you identify like literary techniques, devices that are in the paragraph, and they have to find them except, and then you could have like 1 incorrect answer but 4 correct options. Not something that you have to do, but also something that you can do. The whole idea with this is you're going from test taker to test maker. So we're switching your point of view so that you kind of get better, I think, a better understanding of how questions get worded, how questions get phrased. And I think after doing it, it helps you you expect how the questions are going to show up as you are reading a passage. You kind of start to anticipate, oh, I think there's going to be a syntax question around here, because I'm starting to kind of notice the parallel structure. So I don't want to say that dividends are going to pay off right away, but I do think that you'll start to become a little bit more comfortable with the types of questions that get posed on AP exam after you go through the process of making some of them. When it comes to the last ones that we have here, rhetorical purpose, literary technique, and effect. Rhetorical purpose, this is kind of, when we talk about the SPA, strategy, purpose, argument, you're identifying what the overall purpose is going to be. For this one, and it looks like board froze, yay, there we go. Your answers would be most likely starting with verbs. So, the purpose of the 3rd paragraph is to criticize the American government, advocate for, some kind of new policy. Unify separated groups of people, something along those lines. But your answers are going to be really focusing on verbs. Literary technique, basically rhetorical devices. Number 9 is one that folks will kind of get a little bit of question about from time to time with effect. Identify the effect of certain phrases or sentences on other parts of the passage. This is when you're really kind of looking at relationships among phrases, sentences, or paragraphs. So sometimes people could do something What is the effect of the second paragraph in relation to the first paragraph? Possible answer could be the first paragraph introduces a definition, the second paragraph provides an explanation. The second paragraph emphasizes the contrast presented in the first paragraph. So you're kind of taking a look at how bits and pieces work together. You might be looking at shifts also that could potentially kind of come up. How would you best characterize the shift in the beginning of the fourth paragraph? And you could kind of explain what the other parts were doing. It's a little bit of a catch-all question where you're looking at how one part of the passage relates to another part. As mentioned, you're going to make sure that the order of the questions reflects the organization of the passage, so it's going to be chronological order. So questions about lines 1 to 10 would be before questions about lines 11 to 20, so on and so forth. You are not taking each other's quizzes. You don't have to worry about that. So make sure you do designate the correct answer with an asterisk, or if you want to underline it or put it in boldface, italicize it, whatever. But one of your answers is going to be designated as the correct answer. Did you ever get the answer key as like a test? I did that one. The Hiroshima test. The correct answers were in italics. No one said anything. The grades were still not very good. I mean, some did really well, but there were,
Some people didn't.
no pun intended, some people bombed. But,
Last year, Miss Parrish would give out like tests through like a TWA or something like that, but on the back she would get rid of where all the answers or where like the sample essay was.
okay, like for Keystone
Yeah.
stuff, probably.
Oh, that was the best.
He's over last
Could you
year.
just flip it over and then?
Yeah. By next Tuesday, and I'll treat this like a turnitin.com, like 11:59 p.m. By next Tuesday, you're sharing a copy then of your test with my Gmail address. So should Zach, Emma, and Nina decide to work together, you would just share one document with me that has all three of your names at the top. I don't need a Nina document, an Emma document, and then a Zach document where it's the same thing over and over and over again. You don't have to submit it to turnitin.com. You don't have to print out a copy or anything like that, but you're just going to share it with me. I have on Google Classroom posted, and I'll show this to you on Monday, a template so that it's easier to kind of set up your test itself. You'll be able to open that into Google Docs. You can then share it with each other if you're working in a group to work on things, and then one of those copies will just get shared to me when you're all done. Don't share it with me until you're ready to go. Okay. Any general kind of questions about what you need to do? First thing is figuring out what you're going to read, or not read, but what you're going to use as your passage, and then you kind of go from there. How you want to divvy up responsibilities if you're working with other people, that's entirely up to you. On the back of that first page are some potential question stems. Not saying you have to take from 1 through 25, but it gives you an idea at least of how some of the questions could be worded. Do you notice anything somewhat, not unusual, but maybe a little ironic about every single question? You have a lot of that. They're all questions, but none of them are questions. They're all statements. And if you look at your AP stuff that you've done, that's the way that they're worded. So instead of saying, what is the attitude's author toward the subject, it's worded in a statement form. The author's attitude toward the subject could best be described as, and then you have your A, B, C, D, E underneath. So they don't really ask you questions, they give you statements, and then you have to go in and kind of fill in the answers. Again, these are meant to be examples, so you don't want to be the student again who goes, but Mr. Kane, I don't have an illusion in line number 12 with question number 9. Okay, that's fine. Pick another line, or it doesn't have to be an illusion, it's an example. So it's not the way that it has to be. But like number 2, number 5, number 6, those would be examples of like vocabulary and context. Something like number 4 would be rhetorical purpose. Number 7 would be rhetorical purpose. Number 8 would be rhetorical purpose. What would number 3 be? Style of the passage. probably going to be syntax, because you would be characterizing like sentence structure, writing style, and things like that. Maybe potentially some diction kind of coming across.
So, like, in number 11, the diction is best described as, like, what, how would you answer that?
So, yeah, picking, I don't have a passage in mind, but your answers for that's number 11, your answers would then be adjectives. So the diction could best be described as patriotic, unifying, demeaning, whatever the case would be. You could do something where you pick a specific line number, in line 11, the diction could be characterized as, or you could flip it where you could go, which line best characterizes the unifying diction as used by the speaker, and then you have line 1, line 12, line 18, line 19. So you could kind of go either way with it. But for your diction questions, you're pretty much probably going to be putting adjectives down more so than anything else. And if you even wanted to highlight specific words, the use of this word in line 11, this word in line 12, this word in line 13, if you think that helps kind of funnel toward a correct answer, you could do something like that as well. So it's not that you have to use this wording. You're more than welcome to, but it's just a way that you can kind of see how some of these questions would be used. So something like, number 16 would be the literary technique thing. 17, by juxtaposing line 12 with line 10, the author achieves. This would be an example of like an effect question, where you're looking at how different parts of the passage relate to one another. This one here could be an effect question. Since you're taking a look at shift, you could argue there could be a tone question as well, so there's some that kind of could go either way with it, depending upon what it is you need to do. If you have questions about it with me, just run it by and I can kind of let you know where I think it would certainly best work. This here would be an effect question as well, the relation to the first paragraph. This is what the second paragraph accomplishes. So just again, some potential stems. You can certainly look at old AP tests, that we've done in passages, because that'll give you a good idea of some things that you can use as well. Number 22, one can infer that the author, that would be a point of view question. So you can infer that the author and then identify like what a viewpoint would be towards some kind of specific idea. So point of view. All right. Then on pages 3 through 5, and this is an old one, Jungle Heath. Heath is less than excited.
Yeah, he was.
I got it.
Or Eche.
This is the map that you can use. This is exactly what I was going to do.
This is a sample that was done years and years and years ago. This was back when everyone did The Jungle as a summer read novel. Back in the old days, you did The Jungle and A Farewell to Arms. Or A Farewell to Fun.
Yeah.
And then it switched to The Grapes of Wrath. I made that or now
I
he
think that's my bet.
East of Eden. Here we come.
That's what you're reading now?
I think so. I started reading again last night and I was like, boy, I really do like this book. I remember why. I
What's
picked it
it
up.
about?
Everyone needs to appreciate the Great Depression.
You can do later.
This is like this is like Adam and Eve story all over again, but in California and New England.
Oh.
The Hamiltons and the Trask family coming together. All the brothers are like C and A, like Charles and Adam, and all that kind of stuff, or Aaron and Caleb, and they all hate each other. So, good times. Good times. Before this one's pretty good. It is not perfect by any means. There are some flaws with it. Can anyone tell a problem that this group ran into before they got to question number 1? So even before the questions start, they have a little issue that could cause problems for them. And like they did take, the passage from the correct one. It's not like it doesn't exist here.
There's no reference point, so I don't know where it's coming from in the first place.
Well, and you don't have to include that. So it's the fact that it just kind of starts with it right away. That's okay. I bet that most of you probably won't do a reference point. If it makes you feel better, you certainly can. But that's not the issue. guess so.
Transfiguration isn't on line 6 for the first
Well, that is a problem,
one.
which is why it's not perfect, but there's even something before that. But you're kind of on the right track so far as line numbers. What would happen if they ask a question about line 36 or 37? They have a formatting issue where they have line 35, so that would make this one down here 36, the one down below it 37. But if you go then to the top of the page, where you have line 40, and again, Smartboard's kind of giving me issues, if you were to count up from line 40, it would count all the way up to line 36. So if you had a question about line 36 or 37, which ones am I looking at? So they should have cut it after line 35, first column, pasted it over to second column. They just had a little bit of a formatting snafu that took place. Now your point though about line 6 with transfiguration is accurate because I think it shows up in what, line 7?
Yeah.
It's line 7 or line 8. So you do want to make sure that as you are doing your line numbers, you double check that everything's right. Because if Josh starts making, a question about line number 3, and then someone else in the group reformats the passage and line numbers shift, all those questions could be kind of thrown off. Or, something like this where when you copy and paste in the passage, it's all going to go in the first column. Then you're going to have to cut part of it and put it into the second column. You're probably going to have to change the spacing and the font size and all that stuff a little bit because we've had situations where these line numbers are single spaced, but if the passage is 1.5 spaced, you have like line numbers in between lines, which ends up being really kind of confusing and whatnot. So the hope is that by Tuesday, maybe even every class Monday, you have the passage in the template, and we can make sure that yes, that looks good, or no, we need to end up kind of making some changes. But the fact that they do have A through E for everything, they do have the asterisk in the correct point, in the correct place, identifying correct answer, all that stuff is good. As silly as it sounds, and question number 4 would be an example, like the Roman numeral question. Which syntax is a pretty good thing to do with the Roman numerals, characterizing different types of syntax, the way they have repetition, alliteration, you could put epistrophe and all those kinds of things in there. Make sure that your questions only have one right answer. So you don't want to do something, identify the rhetorical device that's present in this paragraph, and you're using metaphor, you have simile, and you didn't notice the simile that's in like the second sentence of that paragraph, that could end up, causing a little bit of an issue. So those little things you kind of get in the way. But overall, people do pretty well with it. You pick your passage, you're coming up with some questions. Again, the whole idea is just to kind of give you a different perspective as to kind of how the questions are created, and I think that kind of helps you when it comes to taking the questions. You start to better anticipate what some of the answer choices would be, and things of that nature. So next week, Monday through Friday, with the exception of Wednesday, we would be working on this in class because we'll have the laptops in here. You'll be able to open up a Google document, share it with people within your group or obviously individually. The only thing that would kind of get in your way on Thursday would be the poetry quiz at the beginning, but then you'd have the rest of Thursday and Friday to work on it. Aside from the poetry quiz, the hope is then that next week outside of class, you're focused on invisible. Yeah, no, we're done. So it's made it far enough. Any questions? Try to pick something you like, or try to find something that you don't dislike as much as other stuff. That can certainly help. All right. That's right next week. That's what we're working on. If you think it's easier to work on your own, you can. If you still want to buddy up with someone, you have the ability. Just to let them know what you can and what you can't do.
Did you create the study guide on completion?
Here, let me